Hello, Karen here. Today, I want to talk about something that has become one of the most overlooked factors in modern health. In my experience, when people struggle with stubborn weight, low energy, poor sleep, cravings, brain fog, and or hormonal issues, they often assume they have lots of separate problems. The reality is, many of these symptoms are all connected. And one of the missing pieces is something most people have never been taught about: magnesium. But this video is not really a talk about magnesium. It's a talk about how your body communicates with you. And yeah, your body communicates with you. So basically, it's a really important component of health. Why am I exhausted in the afternoon? Why can't I lose belly fat? Why do I wake up at 3 a.m. for no apparent reason? Why am I hungry an hour after eating? Now, these are not separate problems. They are literally the same problem. Your body has been sending signals through fatigue, cravings, restless nights, stubborn weight, all pointing to one underlying dysfunction. And so this is what we're going to discuss today. And it's actually what I call is a silent epidemic. People assume insulin resistance is something that happens shortly before diabetes. Now that couldn't be further from the truth. Insulin resistance develops slowly, often over years, sometimes decades. During that time, blood tests will appear normal. And you might be told that everything looks fine. Meanwhile, you're gaining weight more easily, struggling with energy, craving sugar, losing metabolic flexibility, and sometimes feeling older than they should. The body whispers long, long before it screams. So I just want to simplify here is insulin, because it's one of the most misunderstood hormones in the body. For most, you might think that insulin simply is a blood sugar hormone, but it's so much more than that. Insulin is one of the master regulators of metabolism. It controls how fuel enters the cells. It influences fat storage. It affects protein building. It helps move minerals into cells. It even influences inflammation. Now, when insulin works properly, the whole orchestral of hormones and enzymes and everything plays beautifully together. Now, when insulin signaling becomes impaired, the music literally starts falling apart. I've often been known to describe insulin resistance as cellular deafness. The signal is still being sent. The cells simply aren't listening. Imagine somebody ringing your doorbell repeatedly. Eventually, they ring louder, then louder again. That is exactly what the pancreas does. It produces more insulin, and more insulin, and more insulin, and still the blood sugars look normal. But insulin levels are climbing behind the scenes. By the time blood sugar rises, the process has often been occurring for many, many years. And this is often the point where people start joining the dots. Many of us have been taught to look at symptoms individually. We treat the fatigue separately from weight gain, the brain fog separately from the cravings, the skin issues separately from the sleep problems. But our bodies do not work in separate compartments. Everything, but everything is connected. When insulin signaling starts to become impaired and our cells become less responsive, the body starts sending warning signs. The problem is that most of us dismiss them as getting older, being busy, or simply part of life. One of the first things people notice is unstable energy. They wake up tired, rely on caffeine to get moving, feel reasonably good for a while, then suddenly hit a wall around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Some people describe it as simply pulling the plug out. Their concentration disappears. They become irritable, and all they can think about is finding something sweet or having another coffee. Others notice they become shaky, anxious, or hungry, even if they haven't eaten for a few hours. It's often a sign that the body is becoming dependent on a regular supply of glucose because it has lost some of its ability to efficiently access stored fat. Then there is the brain. Many people tell me they don't feel as sharp as they once did. They walk into a room and forget why they're there. They lose words mid-sentence. They struggle to focus on the tasks that used to be easy. Some describe feeling as though they're thinking through cotton wool. Blood sugar instability affects the brain because the brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in the body. When cells aren't receiving fuel efficiently, concentration, memory, and mental clarity can really, really suffer. Moods can also be affected. People experience increased irritability, anxiety, low motivation, or emotional ups and downs. Sometimes they don't realize these feelings improve shortly after eating, which can be a clue that blood sugar regulation is involved. The body leaves clues that we can actually see. So one of the common signs of insulin deficiency or insulin incompatibility is skin tags, particularly around the neck, under the arms, or around the groin area. These small growths are strongly associated with elevated insulin levels and insulin resistance. Another sign can be darkened, velvety patches of skin, often around the neck and under the arms. Some people notice increased abdominal weight gain despite eating what they believe is a healthy diet. Others find they gain weight very easily, but struggle enormously to lose it. Puffiness around the face, fluid retention, and swelling can also occur as insulin influences how kidneys regulate sodium and water balance. One of the biggest clues is inflammation. People often wake with stiff joints, aching muscles, or general soreness, despite not having injured themselves. Their body feeling older than it should. Small cuts can take longer to heal. Digestive symptoms become common, including bloating, reflux, irregular bowel motions, and discomfort after meals. Inflammation is not just something that affects the joints. It can affect the brain, blood vessels, liver, gut, and virtually every tissue in the body. When insulin resistance is present, inflammation often rises alongside it, creating a cycle that drives further metabolic dysfunction. None of these symptoms automatically mean you are insulin resistant. But when several of them appear together, particularly the combination of stubborn weight, cravings, fatigue, brain fog, mood changes, skin tags, and poor sleep, it becomes much more likely that your metabolism is struggling to function as efficiently as it once did. The good news is that these symptoms are not random. They are messages. And once we understand what the body is trying to tell us, we can start addressing the cause rather than simply manage the symptoms. And this is one of my favorite concepts, and that is metabolic flexibility. Humans were designed to switch between fuel sources. After a meal, we burn glucose. Between meals, we burn stored fat. That flexibility allowed our ancestors to thrive. Today, many people have been trapped in sugar burning mode. Bodies struggle to access stored energy. That's why skipping a meal can sometimes, in many people, feel like an emergency where your blood sugars go AWOL. It's also one reason why weight loss becomes increasingly difficult. And this brings us to magnesium. And this is where things get really interesting, because magnesium sits quietly underneath almost every process that we've been discussing here. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions: energy production, sleep regulation, nervous system balance, muscle function, blood sugar regulation, hormone production, DNA repair, detoxification. Without magnesium, the body can have plenty of fuel available, but struggle to use it effectively. It's a bit like having a petrol in a car with no spark plugs. And this is where you realize that magnesium is so much more than simply a mineral for cramps or relaxation. Magnesium is involved in multiple stages of the insulin process itself. So to understand this, let's follow the journey of a meal. Step 1, insulin has to be released. Imagine you've just eaten a meal. As food is digested, glucose begins entering the bloodstream. The pancreas acts like a sensor. It monitors blood sugar levels and decides when insulin needs to be released. However, even in this first step, requires magnesium. Magnesium helps activate the energy systems inside the insulin producing beta cells of the pancreas. Without enough magnesium, those cells struggle to produce and release insulin efficiently. It's like having little workers in a factory, but not enough electricity to run the machinery. The insulin factory can still operate, but not nearly as effectively. Now, step 2. The insulin message must be received. Insulin has been released into the bloodstream and starts traveling around the body looking for cells that need energy. If you think of insulin as a key, the cells have locks called insulin receptors. The insulin key arrives and fits perfectly into that lock. And most would assume the job is done at that point. But the reality is far more interesting. Turning the key is only the beginning. Once insulin docks with the receptor, a whole chain of internal signals must be activated inside the cell. Magnesium is required to switch on that signaling process. Without magnesium, insulin can arrive, attach itself to the receptor, and still fail to deliver its message effectively. It's like ringing a doorbell when the house has no electricity. The button works, but nothing happens inside. Step 3, the door must open. Once the signal is received, the cell must physically move glucose transporters to its surface. These transporters are called GLUT4 transporters. Don't worry about remembering the name. Think of them as tiny doors that allow glucose to move from the bloodstream into the cell. When insulin signaling works properly, these doors move to the cell surface and open. Glucose enters the cell, where it can be used to make energy. And as I said, magnesium helps drive the signaling pathway that tell these doors to move. Without enough magnesium, many of these doors never reach the surface. Glucose remains circulating in the bloodstream rather than entering the cells where it belongs. So why does this matter? This creates a strange situation. You can have plenty of fuel in the bloodstream, but the cells are effectively starving. The body sees glucose building up outside the cells and responds by producing more insulin. The cells still aren't responding properly. More insulin is released, and the cycle continues. Over time, this contributes to insulin resistance, cravings, fatigue, weight gain, and metabolic dysfunction. So, to put it simply, magnesium helps the pancreas release insulin. Magnesium helps the cells hear insulin's message. Magnesium helps glucose enter the cells. When magnesium is low, the entire process becomes less efficient or causes havoc. And this is where things become incredibly frustrating. Low magnesium doesn't just contribute to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance makes magnesium deficiency even worse. The two conditions feed each other. So the first problem is what we've discussed, is magnesium can't get into the cells. Under normal circumstances, insulin helps transport magnesium into cells where it can perform its many jobs. When insulin resistance develops, this transport system becomes even less effective. So even if magnesium is present in the bloodstream, it may not be getting into the cells efficiently. It's like having building supplies sitting outside a construction site, but no workers available to bring them inside. The second problem, and this is where it gets really, really interesting, is the kidneys start throwing magnesium away. High insulin levels create another issue. The kidneys begin excreting more magnesium through the urine. In other words, the body starts wasting one of the very minerals it desperately needs. So you could be unknowingly losing magnesium every single day. And here's the crunch. The third problem is blood tests can look totally and utterly normal. And this is around magnesium deficiency. And so only about 1% of the body's magnesium is found in the bloodstream. The vast majority should be stored inside the cells, tissues, and bones. The body will work extremely hard to keep blood magnesium within a very narrow range because it's vital for survival. So you will be having a blood test and it will appear totally normal, while the cells are running dangerously low, simply because the body will take magnesium from those cells, the tissues and bones, rather than allow the bloodstream to become low in it. And so this is where the symptoms start to appear. As magnesium stores fall, cells become less responsive to insulin. As insulin resistance worsens, more magnesium is lost. Energy production becomes less efficient. Cravings increase. Sleep becomes disrupted. Inflammation rises. weight becomes harder to release, and the cycle tightens its grip. There is some good news, however. The encouraging part is that once we begin restoring magnesium status while simultaneously improving metabolic health, we can start breaking the cycle. This is when the body becomes more sensitive to insulin. The cells regain access to fuel. Energy production improves. Cravings will reduce or even disappear. And many people begin to feel like themselves again. This is what I've heard time after time after time when people have been working with our drop weight drops or been working with our fast track to health programs, is I get, oh, Karen, I feel like myself again. And this is the aim. This is the whole thing about healing. But basically, I just want to go back to magnesium. It gets really, really interesting because you might think magnesium deficiency causes muscle cramps and poor sleep. But what many don't realize is magnesium is absolutely vital, not just for the things we've just been discussing, but also for digestive health. In fact, some of the earliest signs of magnesium deficiency can show up in the digestive system. And unfortunately, the people who most need magnesium often have digestive symptoms that make it hard to absorb. So if we start at the earlier part of digestion, so digestive processes start in the mouth from chewing. We make digestive enzymes in our saliva. But the most interesting thing is probably the stomach. Now, you've heard of stomach acid, but few realize how important it really is. Stomach acid is there to digest food, kill unwanted microbes, and prepare nutrients for further absorption down the digestive tract. The cells that produce stomach acid use tiny molecular pumps called proton pumps. These pumps move hydrogen ions into the stomach and create the acidic environment needed for the first stages of digestion. If you think of them as microscopic acid-producing factories, like every factory, they require energy to operate efficiently. And magnesium is involved in generating and using that energy. When magnesium levels are low, stomach acid production becomes sluggish. Food may sit in the stomach longer than it should. Proteins may not be broken down efficiently. Minerals such as iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium itself will be absorbed less effectively. This is one reason why people can experience reflux, indigestion, bloating, or a feeling of heaviness, despite actually having too little stomach acid rather than too much. So if you're on anti-acids and all of those sorts of things, it might be time to look at it in a slightly different way. You might be magnesium deficient, or you might have too much acid. Not too much acid, too little acid due to magnesium deficiency. And then let's travel down a bit further is pancreatic enzymes. And once the food leaves the stomach, the pancreas takes over a large part of the digestive process. The pancreas produces not just insulin, but produces digestive enzymes that break down fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. However, these enzymes are not released in their active form. They're initially processed as inactive compounds called zymogens. Think of zymogens as enzymes packed in safety mode. The body keeps them inactive, so they don't accidentally digest the pancreas itself. Once they reach the small intestine, they are activated and begin breaking down food. Now again, magnesium plays a role in the production, release, and activation of many of these digestive enzymes. When magnesium levels are low, enzyme production may be less efficient, will be less efficient, and digestion will be incomplete. Food isn't fully broken down and nutrients aren't fully extracted. And again, you'll be experiencing bloating, gas, discomfort, and feeling that food simply sits there. And then let's come to bile, one of the most overlooked fluids in the body. Bile is produced by the liver and stored in a gallbladder. Now, if you haven't got a gallbladder, your body is still creating bile, so this still is applicable to you. Bile's primary job is to emulsify fats, turning large fat droplets into tiny particles that digestive enzymes can work on. Without adequate bile flow, healthy fats become much harder to digest and absorb. Fat-soluble vitamins, such as vitamin A, D, E, and K, can also become more difficult to utilize effectively. Magnesium supports the smooth muscle contractions involved in bile release and contribute to many of the energy-dependent processes occurring in the liver. When magnesium is low, bile flow can become sluggish. If bile flow becomes sluggish, then the gallbladder can become congested because bile becomes really sluggish and sticky. Could it be a root cause of gallstones? Well, that's something to think about. This can contribute to bloating after meals, fatty meals especially, nausea, constipation, and a feeling that food isn't moving properly. Some people describe it as feeling heavy or full for hours after eating. Also, you can be feeling very nauseous. You can vomit. You can also have diarrhea. And you could basically, bile doesn't just help digest fats. It is one of the body's major elimination pathways. Excess hormones, toxins, cholesterol, and waste products are all packaged into bile for removal through the bowel. So, if bile flow slows, detoxification can become less efficient, and the digestive system also feels the consequences. Next, we come to gut motility. Gut motility simply refers to movement through the digestive tract. From the moment food enters the mouth until waste leaves the body, coordinated muscle contractions move everything along in carefully organized sequence. And of course, magnesium plays a key role in regulating those muscular contractions. It helps the muscles relax after they contract and supports its electrical signaling required for proper rhythm and coordination. When magnesium levels are low, the digestive tract becomes sluggish. Food remains in the stomach longer. The bowel may move more slowly. Constipation becomes more and more common. Gas and bloating will increase. Some people feel as though their digestive system has just simply forgotten how to move, and they get impacted bowels. Others experience the opposite problem, where poor coordination contributes to loose stools or unpredictable bowel habits. We're called irritable bowel. Either way, efficient movement requires adequate magnesium. So if you think about what we've just covered, low magnesium can reduce stomach acid production. It can impair digestive enzyme activation. It can slow bile flow. It can reduce gut motility. All of these things make digestion less efficient. If digestion becomes less efficient, it becomes harder to absorb all the other nutrients, including magnesium. This creates a catch-22. The people who need magnesium the most often have digestive systems that are least capable of obtaining it efficiently, which is why exactly we need to think differently about restoring magnesium levels. This is why I've been such a strong advocate for transdermal magnesium over the years. Rather than relying on a compromised digestive system, we're applying magnesium directly through the skin. The skin is our largest organ. It's our largest detoxification organ, but also it's our largest absorption organ. This approach bypasses many of the obstacles that limit oral absorption. For most of my clients, it becomes one of the simplest, most effective ways to rebuild magnesium stores. Basically, if you think about it, you might be taking the best food, you might be having the best supplements, but if your body is unable to convert those foods, those supplements, then you will not be absorbing. And this is why, as far as I'm concerned, transdermal magnesium is the best way of topping ourselves up. Why? So my magnesium is rather unique due to my story. Basically, is in the late 80s, I was studying natural nutrition, and I knew after the lecturer was talking about magnesium and what we needed it for. Now, we didn't know as much then as we know now what magnesium is used for, but basically I knew that I needed magnesium, so I took what was available at the time, and that was tablets. And I noticed hardly any difference. In fact, I didn't notice any difference. And I had clients at the same time and didn't see any changes in them. And so as new magnesiums came out, powders, liquids, different forms, magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate, you name it, I tried every single one of them until 2006, when I went back home to the UK and had a meeting with one of my ex-students. And she said, Karen, have you tried this? And it was transdermal magnesium. And of course I said no. And so I tried it, and I noticed a difference almost immediately. And so I started researching, and transdermal magnesium is always magnesium chloride. And there's a reason why, because it gets absorbed and utilized as magnesium. It goes onto the skin, it goes right into the bloodstream. And basically it's being aided by absorption because of its hygroscopic tendencies, because basically it draws more moisture and really aids it going into your skin. And so with ours, so basically got home to New Zealand, no one was making magnesium, transdermal magnesium at the time, couldn't find any easily available. So we started importing magnesium chloride, which comes from the Dead Sea, because it was the best I could find. And we still import it from the Dead Sea. And also it was a spray at that time, and it stayed being a spray until I think it was about 2013, when I found a gelling agent called gum tragacanthum. And gum tragacanthum basically comes from the withania bush, and I feel it has some energetic components of withania, as in calmative. And so I've always added essential oils and homeopathics to it, because I felt that if you're going to put one thing in, you might as well put a few others. That's going to be broad spectrum and help as many people as we could. And recently, over this year, which is 2026, I've been diving deeply into olive leaf extract and olive leaf itself and olive oil. And I found, this is a long story short, I found that by putting some of our aged tincture into it, and also soaking olive leaves into the actual magnesium, leads to less irritation, but also really amazing results. That's a work in progress. But basically, we've got what we call the living magnesium. So we've got two. One which is fast track to health magnesium gel, and the other is the living gel, which is magnesium. So these are things we talk about in our weight drop release membership, but also what I recommend for fast track to health, and also with our drop weight drops. And so basically ours is very unique. I do feel, tongue in cheek, that as is the best on the market, simply because my clients get really, really good results. And so what people often report isn't dramatic. However, saying that, I have had clients who haven't been able to sleep, have had really severe things like plantar fasciitis and all sorts of things. Putting magnesium on their skin has given them overnight release. However, this is the time frame on this slide here is basically days 1 to 7, better sleep, less muscle cramps, less restlessness, weeks 2 to 4, fewer sugar cravings, steadier energy, and months 1 to 3, your body composition shifts. And you can understand it with what we've been talking about. So as an overview, clients sleep better, wake up more refreshed, their muscles feel calmer, cravings begin to reduce, energy becomes steadier, recovery improves, and the body starts behaving like it was designed to. So I've spent more than 40 years immersed in natural health. And during that time, I've worked with thousands of people. And long before magnesium became fashionable, I kept seeing the patterns: poor sleep, stress, cravings, weight struggles, hormonal challenges, low energy, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, you name it. And 20 years ago, as I said, I discovered transdermal magnesium. Then I went on to import it, and we've created it ourselves. And magnesium is always part of the solution. And today, research is finally catching up to what many of us have observed clinically decades ago. And this really isn't just about magnesium. Magnesium is one piece of a much bigger picture. Real health comes from supporting the body rather than fighting it. Minerals matter. Salt matters. Food matters. Sleep matters. Stress matters. Movement matters. Metabolic flexibility matters. When we give the body what it needs, remarkable things can happen. And this is where my programs, protocols, and everything else are really, really important. Basically, if we get the food right, so I get clients onto low inflammatory foods. If you get your water right, then your body starts working with you, not against you. Your body is always communicating with you. Cravings are communication. Fatigue is communication. Poor sleep is communication. Weight gain is communication. The question is whether we're listening. And sometimes the message begins with something as simple as magnesium. But saying that, if you do all of the things that I get people to do on my programs, is that speeds up the process. So you can do magnesium and you might find that's enough, but most of the time it isn't. So if you would like more information about my programs or would like a consultation, one-on-one consultation, I do only a few of those. And basically, if you would like to join us in improving your health and well-being in a group, all the links will be below this video. And if you've lasted this amount of time, wow, thank you very much for staying with me, for enjoying, hopefully, this information. If you like this information, please, please, please share it with someone or get in touch with me. As I say, all of the details are below. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for playing. Lots of love. Bye for now.